Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Thailand Music and Art Symposium. This will be our last paper presentation by Mr. Joseph Bohigian, and it's our pleasure to have him here. Today, he will present his paper about the water has found its crack, fighting Armenia through music. Mr. Joseph Bohigian, please feel free to start your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One moment. In a 2005 article, Turkish-Armenian journalist and activist Hrant Dink tells the story of a French-Armenian woman who died while visiting the village of her youth in Turkey. When the question of where she should be buried arose, a Turkish man from the village responded, "Let her be buried here. The water has found its crack." This response carries a lot of profound meaning. It refers to a story of the Armenian longing to be reunited with their indigenous land. This is not a longing motivated by the need to take the land, but in Dink's words, to come and be buried under it. This longing is part of the story of Armenia, where its people, through centuries of foreign domination and dispersion, have emphasized the importance of maintaining a strong sense of Armenian identity. This longing motivates the need that Armenians display for reunification, if not physically, then at least spiritually. The concept of the water finding its crack reflects questions that many Armenians of the diaspora, myself included, have about the idea of homeland and our relationship to it. These questions motivated me as I traveled to Armenia and began composing my piece, "The Water Has Found Its Crack," for three sopranos, percussion, violin, viola, and cello. This piece would become a musical manifestation of my exploration of Armenian identity. It takes its title from the Hrant Dink story and explores this metaphor in both a figurative and literal manner. At a figurative level, the lingering quarter-tone glissandi push at boundaries as they gradually fill in the space between pure-pitched notes, acting as reconstructions of Armenian folk and liturgical singing. On a more literal level, the idea of the water finding its crack is represented in the text, which references water as an exploration of displacement, dispersion, and reclamation. Displacement, dispersion, and reclamation are dealt with separately in this presentation as I contextualize these concepts in reference to my piece. My intention for doing this is to trace the ways these three elements of Armenian culture affect the negotiation of internal and external identity boundaries in diaspora. The homeland is a central magnetic point for Armenians. However, defining the boundaries of conceptions of homeland is not simple, given the divergent histories of Eastern Armenian culture in the modern republic and Western Armenian culture in exile since the genocide. The concept of an Armenian homeland is also not limited to a physical place. In the words of journalist Liana Aghachanyan, Armenia may be a country, but it is also a concept, one that functions independent of geography. This idea is echoed by Armenian-American author William Saroyan, who defiantly wrote in 1935, "Go ahead, destroy this race. See if the race will not live again when two of them meet in a beer parlor 20 years after and laugh and speak in their tongue." For much of my life, this sentiment by Saroyan rings true. The great-grandson of genocide survivors, displacement was always a part of my family's history. Yet however close I felt to Armenianness, a sense of feeling connected to Armenian people and culture remained distant. I was simultaneously both belonging and not belonging to the culture. This feeling of distance is what brought me to Armenia, to be rerouted. My piece, "The Water Has Found Its Crack," is a response to how I experience rerootedness. The modern Armenian diaspora mainly comes as a consequence of the 1915 genocide. In short, Western Armenia was emptied of its indigenous Armenian population through massacres and forced deportations by the Ottoman Empire. Although Armenians have lived outside their homeland for centuries, the genocide engenders within Armenians of the diaspora a stress on the importance of maintaining their Armenian identity. Subsequent displacements from Lebanon, Azerbaijan, Syria, and most recently Artsakh have turned exile for some Armenian families into a constant state of being. The themes of displacement and loss are important because of the need to preserve cultural identity. This intention is embedded in Armenian music. Among the folk songs collected by the composer, musicologist, and priest Komitas Vardapet, dispossession was a recurring theme. This is especially true of the migrant songs, which display a longing for the homeland or those who have traveled away from it. In the popular migrant song Kurunk, meaning crane, the migrant repeatedly pleads, "Crane, have you no news from our country?" Yet he receives no response. The text for The Water Has Found Its Crack, which you can see on this slide, consists of fragments from 8 Armenian folk songs transcribed by Komitas, which I gathered while working at the Komitas Museum Institute in Yerevan. Many of the text fragments recall the themes of the migrant songs, using water as a metaphor for distance, longing, and loss. For example, from the song Tunari comes "Water Has Destroyed My House." From Kakavierk, "You present a heart to the sea of grief." And from Garun, "Spring has passed and autumn came. Water has stopped flowing from its source." The text fragments are reassembled so that sometimes a whole section comes from one song, while other sections move between song source at every line. In this way, I construct a new narrative on the theme of displacement from the text fragments. The central section of the piece is a quasi-folk song. It is closely connected to the migrant genre of folk songs, dealing with issues of dispossession and longing. The text comes from 2 songs, Tunari, meaning come home, and Tsiranitsar, meaning apricot tree, and tells of the destruction of home and separation from loved ones. The song, which is shown on this slide, and which I'll from now on refer to as Jurutunas Kandera, meaning water has destroyed my house, embodies the feeling of displacement and loss in the folk songs by borrowing different musical characteristics from various folk songs. It is sung slowly and freely without a strong sense of meter, and is highly ornamented. In these qualities, it is similar to the style of migrant songs and the tacher, or odes, a genre of monodic song developed in the 10th century characterized by chromaticism, unrestricted modulation, and virtuosity. So I'll play for you now a recording of the quasi-folk song without the rest of the instruments. This next slide shows excerpts of 3 Armenian songs transcribed by Komitas, the folk songs Kurunk and Antuni, and the 10th century Tach Havik. These examples demonstrate similarities in styles with Jurutunis Kandera, including in metric freedom, pitch, and ornamentation. In recordings by Komitas and his student Armenak Shamuradian, all 3 songs are sung freely without a strong sense of metric perception. Likewise, Jura Tunis Kandera is sung freely without a strong sense of meter, though meters are added for the purposes of ensemble coordination and performance. In addition, all four examples consist of short phrases of similar lengths which come to rest on different degrees of overlapping tetrachords. So I'll play you now a few examples from these songs. So we'll start with Kurung. And next, here's Antony. And finally, here's an excerpt of the Tach Havik. According to Komitas, Armenian folk music is built on a series of overlapping tetrachords. The connective nature of the overlapping is that the highest pitch of one tetrachord is also the lowest pitch of the one succeeding it. There are three types of tetrachords: Ionian, Dorian, and Phrygian, and the inner notes of these tetrachords may also be altered to include an augmented second interval. And here's an example of that in the song Kali Irk. So you'll hear it begins with the Dorian tetrachord and then introduces the augmented second. This slide shows all aspects I've described pertaining to overlapping Dorian tetrachords. You'll notice how pitch differs in successive octaves when tetrachords are stacked. For example, we'll see here that E4 is the second pitch of its tetrachord, but an octave above is E flat 5 as the third pitch of its tetrachord. Such correlations that result from placing tetrachords in such a continuity is that there is no octave equivalence and only one tonic pitch. The same pitch class as tonic in another octave serves a different function in its tetrachord. So in this example, G4 is the tonic, but G5 an octave above is the second pitch of its tetrachord. However, although there is only one tonic, the first or last pitch of each tetrachord can also serve as a resting place in a melodic line. My song is structured using the Armenian tetrachord system as described by Komitas in the Dorian mode with G as the tonic as shown here. It has a ternary form with the first and third section centered on the G, A, B flat, C tetrachord, and the second section on the C, D, E flat, F tetrachord. Like the other song examples, Jura Tunis Kandera is highly ornamented. The virtuosic melismatic ornamentations are reminiscent of the melodic style of Havik and the Tahir. The songs also share specific ornamentation figures, so for example, my song and Kurunk both begin with a quick ascending major second figure from the first pitch of the primary tetrachord to the second pitch, which is then sustained, creating tension which is released at the end of the phrase by returning to tonic. So I'll play you now the opening of my quasi-folk song and the opening of Kurunk. Most Armenian music is traditionally based in monody. However, when performed in a group, as in an ensemble accompanying a singer, the resulting texture can be heterophonic, with slight differences in rhythm and ornamentation in the varying interpretations of the melody. Likewise, in The Water Has Found Its Crack, the song Jura Tunis Kandera is set heterophonically in 3 voices, which you can see on this slide. Similarly, the strings follow the melodic contour of the melody with overlapping glissandi, trailing the melodic line as an extension of the voice's heterophonic texture. So first, let's listen to an example of Armenian heterophonic music, and this is Ashharumis Achchim Kashi by the Ashukh Sayatnova. And now here's the full ensemble version of my quasi-folk song from the piece. With its allusions to folk song idioms and stylistic borrowings from Armenian music, The Waters Found Its Crack evokes the concept of displacement. This aspect of displacement is present in that lines radiate out in both directions from a central point to other sections which are less traditionally set, yet still maintain connections in pitch structure, texture, and melodic style to the quasi-folk song and the tetrachord system. The object of the song's abandoned narrator's calls for her beloved to hurry up, return, come back, acts as the exile. After displacement, the concept of exile makes up a central part of Armenian identity. The worldwide Armenian population is a classical example of diaspora, spanning multiple generations and locations. Repeated displacements and continued Turkish denial of the genocide have made exile central to Armenians' self-representation. Unlike most people, exiles live with an awareness of at least two cultures, two homes. Borrowing a musical term, Edward Said calls this plurality of vision, which gives rise to an awareness of simultaneous dimensions, contrapuntal. In other words, experiences in the new environment exist within the context of the old one. Both are vivid, actual, occurring together contrapuntally. For Armenian descendants of the dispersed, this exilic mindset is passed down from generation to generation. A sense of loss, which is not always spoken but rather felt, pervades the Armenian collective consciousness. Music has played a central role in Armenian identity maintenance in the diaspora, both in which music is deemed acceptable for the Estradain genre, which began in Beirut in the 1960s, is credited with strengthening the sense of Armenian identity among the diaspora in Lebanon. Though a hybrid pop music from Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean, Estradain music was sung in Armenian about Armenians. However, Estradain music was all defined by what it was not, Turkish. The rising popularity of Estradain music purposefully came at the expense of the Turkish music popular with the immigrant generation in the name of forming a uniquely Armenian identity. The question of what music can be considered Armenian or listened to by Armenians for the purposes of it has at times been a contentious one. The search for Armenian identity music has at times led to the exclusion of music shared with other cultures, such as Ottoman era music, in which Armenians played an important part. Given Armenia's location at the edge of many powerful empires and states and its longstanding diaspora, a common trend throughout Armenian culture is the influence of its neighbors. However, this cultural exchange goes both ways and is critical in understanding the totality of Armenian music. To borrow from Said, our understanding of Armenian music should be contrapuntal, contextualized by its interactions with other cultures at home and in diaspora. It is within this context that I, a third-generation Armenian American, relate to the contrapuntality of exilic awareness. My sense of Armenianness and my Americanness exist not in opposition, but the opening of The Waters Found Its Crack explores these ideas of the metaphor in its title. The beginning of the piece is characterized by long glissandi stretched over small intervals. They overlap across the ensemble, expanding and contracting in different directions and at different rates to fill in the cracks caused by larger intervals, such as the quarter-tone glissandi that occur at the beginning of the piece. The textural fluidity of the glissandi is the fluidity of dispersion, navigating the different levels of exilic awareness as one moves through different spaces and cultures. The text also concerns fluidity with the opening line, Jud kuga verin saren, meaning water streams down the upper hill. As in pitch, single words are stretched across multiple measures, getting into the cracks of the words and expanding them to break them down to their component parts and see what lies inside. This is especially true of the word jur, meaning water, which is repeated throughout the opening of the piece. The piece approaches the use of tetrachord structures described earlier in a loose way here, tying the melodic essence of the piece to that of traditional music without being limited by its rules. The first section of the piece focuses on the primary tetrachord G, A, B flat, C. From the beginning, it starts to explore the internal boundaries of the tetrachord with quarter-tone glissandi to and from its pitches, filling in the cracks between half steps and stretching them out. Next, the glissandi push outward at the edges of the tetrachord, reaching up to a D flat and down to an F, and toward the internal shift from A to A flat, reflecting the internal chromatic alteration to achieve an augmented second. The glissandi's independent motion in direction and expansion rate across the ensemble is a kind of counterpoint, the counterpoint of exilic awareness. The dissonant beating that results from close overlapping intervals suggests the dissonance in a plural exilic awareness. The slow, sometimes imperceptibly so, expansion and contraction of the glissandi pushing at the internal and external boundaries of the tetrachord system is meant to bring a sense of unease to an otherwise static texture. In their fluidity, the glissandi are the water filling in the cracks of exile in Armenian collective memory. So let's listen now to the beginning, just the first couple minutes of the piece. Sociologist Ani Bakalyan argues in her 1993 study of assimilation and ethnic identity maintenance among New York area Armenians that over generations, Armenian Americans move from being to feeling Armenian. Though they have formed new communities and institutions in their host country, Armenian Americans, like any other immigrant group, become distanced from their ethnic origins over time. They move from the unconscious or ascribed Armenianness of the immigrant generation to the voluntary or symbolic Armenianness of their children and grandchildren. The Armenian Apostolic Church has historically been one of the main centers of reclaiming Armenian identity in diaspora, where it serves as both a religious institution and a cultural center. As illustrated by ethnomusicologist Jonathan McCollum, the music of the church is a particularly significant element for identity maintenance in the Armenian American diaspora. The final section of The Water Has Found Its Crack imitates Armenian chant, therein reclaiming a music I strongly associate with my Armenian American upbringing. The melody is split between three sopranos as a hocket, but each pitch is sustained, creating an overlapping harmony of clusters. This slide shows an example of Armenian sacred chant, Ztagavoren Parats Christos, from the Chashu Sharaganer. The chant is ametric and consists mainly of stepwise motion. The phrases are varying lengths, and it's mainly set syllabically with some melisma, and textural phrasing generally aligns with the musical phrasing. However, this is notably not the case at the end of the second phrase, which ends on the first syllable of the word Christos, emphasizing the word Christ. So let's listen to this example.
Stagavoran parats Christos varvasan mer marmnatsav Isar bogosen yev chachi hamperelov miabanot yam yerkov barevanestu.
This next slide shows a reduction of the chant melody in The Water Has Found Its Crack. It's divided into 4 sections, each with one line of text centered on one tetrachord. Like the previous chant example, it consists of mainly stepwise motion of varying lengths with a weak sense of meter. Different degrees of each tetrachord provide points of resolution, which transform the definition of tonal centers. Over the course of the melody, melisma are gradually added, and as the piece comes to a close, the melody ascends to even higher tetrachords while increasing in tempo. The text for the chant section is shown on this slide. Given the context of the breaks in Armenian history and attempts to mend them by reclaiming one's heritage, the final lines, renewed flowing of stream waters, can be read as a reunion with home. Most of the musical phrase endings align with the phrasing of the text. However, there are a few moments where the textual and musical phrasing do not align, most notably at the end of the second line in the reduction. Here, the musical phrase ends unresolved on an F sharp, a half step below the tonic, on the first syllable of the word kutrav, creating a sense of tension which is resolved at the next phrase. The setting is comparable to the earlier example in the word Christos in Ztagavoren Parats Christos. Now you can see the first part of the final section of the piece. The chant melody is split between the 3 sopranos, with each soprano sustaining her pitch as the melody continues in the other voices. Because the melody primarily moves by step and each section is limited in range, this overlapping of voices results in a series of clusters. In addition to partially obscuring the melodic line, these overlapping entrances can obscure the text, as the consonant cutoff of one syllable does not come until after the next syllable has begun in another voice. The strings here represent an extreme extension of the tetrachord scheme, reaching beyond the central tetrachords and creating new harmonies that are more distant from the dominant sound world of the piece. As seen at the bottom right, extending the tetrachords to the lowest register of the cello results in a C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp tetrachord. This is where the cello stays for most of the final section, rubbing against the D, E, F, G tetrachord where the voices begin. These dissonant harmonies and the small wavering pitch bends in the strings, which rub against an otherwise harmonically stable melody split between the sopranos. As the piece comes to a close, this dissonance fades away and the ensemble melds into one form, a resolution of the friction in an exilic awareness. So let's listen now to the final section of the piece. Riding the waters found its crack while living in Armenia has shaped my sense of self. This process reconciled what it feels to be Armenian within the sphere of its concrete reality. The negotiation of identity boundaries, both internal and external, is a central feature of identity maintenance for the dispersed. Music plays a prominent role in this negotiation, as art, which dwells in the realm of the emotions, can bring a sense of belonging to people otherwise disconnected from their culture. This feeling of exteriority and interiority is what a crack emphasizes. It is also the story of Armenia, the story of an exiled people longing to be reunited, the story of the water finding its crack. Thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
So, any question? Otherwise, I will ask. I will ask you a question myself. Yeah. First of all, I have to say this like it's a little bit also personal for me because I literally was there in Armenia. I was in Yerevan for I could not remember for how long, but maybe a week or two. And I have to be honest, like I find this presentation very touching. And
Thank
the
you.
situation in Armenia has been always like very complicated since the genocide. I mean, like even before the genocide, like since the almost like the very foundation of Ottoman Empire itself. Anyway, for my first, as we already like Armenia, the kingdom founded even more empire became an action empire when Roman was still a republic, and then so like the very first converted into Christian. Obviously, like you guys like have like these very foundation cultures. But how did that change after no, Ottoman Empire? How did that affect your youth?
Sure. I mean, in general, there's a split between, of course, Western Armenia, which was part of the Ottoman Empire, and Eastern Armenia, which was either part of the Russian Empire or Persian Empire. So there's that in there. My family is Western Armenian, so there's very much a mix of cultures and music, but in all different forms, art and culture. Of course, with Turks, Kurds, Assyrians, Greeks living in the region. So, I mean, something that Komitas wrote about was trying to distill like uniquely Armenian version of music, which he said he like went to the villages with the peasants who weren't influenced by other cultures. But I'm not so concerned with like trying to purify, if you could say that, the music. I don't think you can really do that in general, and that's a whole other thing. But there's the influence of lots of different cultures, and of course, extending that into the diaspora, there's this influence of lots of different cultures. So I think that's a central part of Armenian culture, Armenian music that should be embraced.
That aspect, we shouldn't do that with the music. Also, like since we're about to run out of time, I have one last question. Regarding the aspect of exile, and also like the people being, split across. Even now, there's like, sorry, my geography is quite bad. Like how would you call that area? Like across, let's call it like across that region. Do you find your work, sorry, as an agent of to in order to restore some part of Armenian cultures, or as in like a collective of Armenians?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I'm not sure if restore, but like say in the presentation, elements of Armenian culture, and that's something that Armenians in the diaspora have been doing for, and like there have been many American composers before me who are doing similar things, and there are Armenian American composers doing that now. So because that's so central to the culture, it's definitely something that I was thinking about when I was working on this piece.
Thank you so much for your very beautiful presentation and very touching. So,
Thank you.
so now I need to give everybody the next event. Up next, we have a third panel discussion on this decolonizing multiculturalism. It's going to be a very heavy topic, which is running by Professor Anotai Nidibon. And the panelists including Professor Christopher Adler and Ananakong. So again, Joseph, I really wish you for the best success, and hopefully we could meet in the future in person and able to welcome you at the Thailand International Symposium.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's our pleasure to have you. Take care.